Coming up on the panel, it was not Tom Brady's last touchdown pass, so that $500,000 sale of the ball he threw voided. There doesn't appear to be a Tom Brady in this year's NFL draft. We'll ask our experts what they think that means for the hobby. And Anthony Edwards could be the breakout star of the NBA playoffs. It's all next. Welcome to the latest edition of the panel, where we discuss what's hot, what's not, and the latest trends in the memorabilia market space with our panel of experts. David Kohler, the president of SCP Auctions, Jesse Craig, director of business development, PWCC Marketplace, and Nick Sapero, the director of acquisitions and consignments at Collectable. I'm Brad Weinstein. All right, topic one, the ball that was nearly sold, that was supposed to be Tom Brady's last touchdown pass, that didn't, voided after he came back. And as we predicted on this show recently, this is the direction that likely this was going to go, that while the sale was made for over $500,000, obviously the ball is devalued by Brady coming back and playing again. So, David, you want to surmise what happened here? And I would assume you think the right thing happened here.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this sale is going to be null and void, as it should. I mean, you couldn't plan what happened here. And, Leyland's has been in the middle of this. I don't blame them at all. They've done all the right things. And, I really would be talking about the consigner, the person that was thrown the football in the stands. That's the guy we should be talking about that got screwed here. I mean, he was going to get a $400,000 or $500,000 payday, and he's not now. And, but yeah, actually, I think it worked out fine for Leyland's in respect that they're in the news everywhere. They're going to get other consignments because of this. I mean, not that it was great news, but it's all good. They did nothing wrong. Obviously, this sale is not going to go through. And I'll state it again. I really feel that Tom Brady should buy this ball. Just say, hey, I'll pay the consigner $500,000. I'll take it back. I'll write an inscription on it, put it on the shelf, donate it, do something like that.
$500,000. You think he should put up $500,000 for this?
Yeah.
I think he should do that.
Oh, he can't buy that publicity. Absolutely. He should buy that ball back. Pay the consigner. It's all good. It's a feel-good story. Sorry, guys. I decided to come back to football, and I'm going to have future touchdowns. It's a feel-good story.
Counterpoint, Tom Brady needs no publicity. But, okay, I'll hear your point. All right, Jesse, what do you think here? I assume you think the right thing happened as well.
Yep, totally. Like David said, feel for the guy that owned the ball, right? He was expecting a big payday, and that didn't happen. But, look, this is what happens when you buy moments of things that could change. By any final aspect of any player in any sport, things like this can happen. So it was an unfortunate event that for the owner of the ball, for Tom to come back, but Leyland's did the right thing. Nulling the transaction, we knew it would likely happen. But David's also right that Tom could get really good press out of this if he needs additional press. And so I think that the right thing happened, and everybody did what they should do.
Okay, Nick, what do you think here? Tom Brady, the ball that was sold for over $500,000, presumably as his last touchdown pass, which obviously isn't going to be, they null the sale.
I feel bad for no one in this situation. I mean, at the end of the day, the consigner, I mean, he essentially caught a lottery ticket in the stand. So it was, he's still going to get probably $100,000 out of that ball. I mean, it's still a Brady touchdown ball. And with the amount of publicity out there on the ball, he's still going to get a huge payday. Maybe not as much as he could have, but I don't feel bad for him at all. He was really lucky in the stands. And I think Leyland's definitely did the right thing in nulling the sale. And for the winning bidder, I think, it's only right that he actually didn't even pay, so he didn't even need to get returned his money. So,
well, as Alan Golcher, who is in our chat, points out, he hasn't played another game yet. So if he changes his mind again, I suppose, and retires, that it is the last ball. So all's well.
That's why Tom Brady should buy the ball right now and take it back, and then say, "I'm not going to retire." Then he has the last football, right?
And then sells it for 5 million Bitcoins. All right. Topic number 2: the search for the next Tom Brady begins next week. The NFL draft. And if you listen to the pundits, you're going to have to find a 6th round find because there's nobody at the top of the draft that anyone thinks is going to be the next star quarterback. A year after 5 quarterbacks went in the top 15 of the NFL draft, there are very few, if any, that are believed to be worthy of anything that high, even though there are a few teams that may take one, Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett, potentially Desmond Ridder. So this is a very different NFL draft, Jesse. As you kind of look at it from the view of the hobby, what kind of piques your interest about it?
Nothing. This is going to be crazy boring. I mean, they've got about 7 defensive players in the top 10 projected, a couple offensive linemen, and then Pickett as the only quarterback in the top 10. Malik's making some noise, but it's not a very exciting draft. Let's just call it what it is. You know, quarterbacks drive the league. They drive interest. They drive our market from a collectible standpoint. I just don't see this as, you know, catching any headlines from a defensive lineman or an offensive tackle going top 1, 2, or 3.
We don't know what we don't know. Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, Tom Brady himself, all mid to late round picks turned out to be superstar quarterbacks. What do you make of this draft, though, where it is certainly not top heavy with the star players?
No, I mean, everybody's looking for a quarterback and to invest in a quarterback. I think there'll probably be some diamonds in the rough, but that'll come, maybe, 3 or 4 months into the season if one of these guys, ends up being the starter in the given situation. I feel, from a quarterback perspective, I'm more interested potentially to see where potentially Baker ends up. I think is a huge question mark right now as to whether he stays, with the Browns, which I don't think that's happening, or he ends up in Carolina. And Carolina is a huge question mark there, to where any quarterback going to potentially Carolina or Pittsburgh has the potential to win the starting job there.
It's a year of the receiver. We had a crazy market fluctuation with all the star receivers and a number of trades and a reset of salaries. And there's a belief that 6 to 8 wide receivers are going to end up going in the first round in the NFL draft. All right, David, what are your thoughts here? No Tom Brady's in namesake, at least at the top of the draft.
No, I mean, it's pretty boring, obviously. The NFL would love to have, 3, 4, 5 big-time quarterbacks getting drafted every year, but that's not the case. And I really don't pay attention to a lot of this stuff. A lot of these players, again, they get drafted, maybe their first, second, third year, they get some traction. I think of Patrick Mahomes, right? Didn't play much the first year, maybe 1 game. And then the second season, 5,000 yards. Third season, he's on top of the mountain winning a Super Bowl. So, not really interested in this draft this year. It's not much. Wide receivers, yeah, there's some good stuff there, but that's about where it's at this year.
Nick, I know it's not going to be a quarterback at number 1, but someone's going to be the number 1 pick. Is there any value moving forward of someone who is going to be a number 1 pick of the NFL draft?
Not really, especially if it's a tackle or a defensive player. I mean, generally they create a little bit of buzz. Like, I'm an A&M guy, so seeing Myles Garrett go number 1 was great. But in terms of value, he doesn't really sell, or doesn't make a huge impact in the hobby.
All right, let's get to topic 3, which is the midst of the first round of the NBA playoffs. We're here at the time of our taping. 76ers and Golden State Warriors looked fantastic out of the gates. The 2 1 seeds looked fine in game 1. Milwaukee had game 1. The champs survived a scare by Chicago. So let me just get some general takeaways here, Nick. We'll start with you. Just your general takeaway on the hobby of what you're watching for as the NBA playoffs have begun.
Potentially, if you have Jordan Poole sell, I mean, I don't really see how. I mean, he's playing great alongside Curry, and Curry's coming off the bench these past couple games. I just don't know if he could sustain these performances that he's come off of. Tatum had a great finish, but he's going to have a hard time getting past the nets. Donovan Mitchell looks like he needs to put the team on his back and potentially get through. If he can't win against the Mavs without Luka, it's going to be a tough situation for him. And I think the 76ers are potentially a team to beat in the East.
Okay. David, what do you think here? Weird year for you. I know. No LeBron, no Lakers. What do you make of the first round of the NBA playoffs?
Yeah, it is a weird year for sure without the Lakers being in the playoffs. But I've watched some of the games. It's interesting. Minnesota, I watched them beat the Clippers to get, I think, the 7th seed in the playoffs. And Anthony Edwards, I watched in the last game too, the first game. That guy is a stud. And I think he's, in his second, third year. He has a lot of moxie. I really like him. I think he's going to be a big-time star in the next few years. Really like him. We mentioned Jordan Poole. We'll see how he does. He's got a couple of 30-point games. 76ers look pretty good. I'm really intrigued about the Nets-Celtics series, see where that all goes. Celtics up 1-0 now. That's going to be probably a 7th game series, and the winner of that, I feel, could get to the finals.
Yeah, that one feels like it's going to be a classic after the first one that ended up the buzzer. All right, Jesse, what are your general thoughts here off of the early start of the NBA playoffs?
I think the depth of teams is really showing. Some of these young stars, or young studs, I should say, turning into stars kind of in front of our eyes. You see Jordan Poole getting the starting gig, Curry coming off the bench, and how well he's played. You look at Maxey with Philly; he's led their team in scoring the last 2 games. A lot of these young guys. Look at what Brunson did for the Mavs, beating the Jazz without Luka last night. So a lot of these young guys have really shown that they can step up in crunch time in the playoffs. Look, are they going to be worth money long term? If you're one of those guys that wants to play, prospect, you can take a look at these guys and take some risk. But it's been an interesting playoffs with some injuries, with Curry coming off the bench, with Luka not playing. Ja hasn't gotten a lot of playing time lately. So I think there could be some big upsets in the first round of the playoffs, which makes for an exciting finale to the NBA season. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of the playoffs.
Yeah, Minnesota's really interesting. Nick, I want to ask you about Trae Young for a moment. Obviously, the Hawks are off to a rough start in this series, but could you remind me what happened to his values on the marketplace after the Hawks and what he did specifically in the NBA playoffs, which was a surprise to get to the Eastern Conference Finals?
Yeah, I mean, he did great last season, but it's a brand new season. I think he just needs that consistency, and we haven't seen it so far. And I think they're going to have just an awful time getting past the Heat at this point. It's the Heat look like they could just control the game defensively, and the offense is flowing right now. So I don't really see that series even being relevant. So I think Trae values may suffer for it. Not to say that Trae isn't a superstar in our league. I just think the values will potentially level off. I think toward the end of the season they rise and then they fall off, especially if they're not going to make a deep playoff run.
All right, I ask because to David's point about Anthony Edwards, the Hawks were a surprise last year. Young shined on a big stage, took his team farther than I think people thought. And I know it's really early here, but Minnesota is primed for an upset and Edwards is going to lead the way. Do you sense a similar type of trajectory for them if they were to somehow have a surprise deep run here?
No doubt. I mean, I think Anthony Edwards has a huge upside, a huge ceiling. He's a great shooter. He's a very versatile player. I mean, that guy could bounce like John Morant could bounce. I mean, and he could shoot lights out. If he's on fire, he's not missing. I see more consistency levels in him than I see in Trae Young. That's just kind of my outlook on Anthony Edwards. I definitely agree with David. His upside is astronomical.
All right, let's get to the final word. David, we'll start with you. What do you got this week?
I was thinking about a lot of the different markets we've been talking about the last few weeks on the show. Obviously, the ticket market, the Type 1 photo, all these different ones. A market that has taken off, but I think still has a lot of room to grow, is vintage autographed cards that are obviously authenticated by PSA or SGC in the holders. We talk about, obviously all the modern cards. We talked about the Kobe Bryant card we have coming up, PMG sign. Those are awesome and very valuable, very collectible. But think about the early stuff. So we could say tobacco cards, T202s, T206s, T205s, signed by Ty and Cobb, or if you could find one signed by Wagner, Christy Mathewson, Walter Johnson. Many of these have never been seen, or there's only been a few. You could say the Gowdy cards in 33 and 34, obviously the Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, a lot of those Hall of Famers. And then in the 50s, I just think those are still very undervalued. Who thought about getting these vintage baseball cards, or you could say football cards and basketball cards for that matter too, signed by these players? Obviously the Mickey Mantle cards in the 50s and 60s bring a lot of money. I think there's still a lot of room for growth there. And people can collect categories. Go collect the 500 home run hitters, collect the 3,000 hit club signed cards. Maybe the first inductees in the Hall of Fame, things like that. I think that market's still got a lot way to go.
Jesse, final word. What do you got this week?
Well, I'll piggyback off David a little bit here. I completely agree with him, but this is more advice for people that are getting into the space or been in for a while. Don't follow the trends necessarily, right? Like you get people that come into the space and they watch what everyone's buying and they buy it and that gets pumped up. But you want to make a really good ROI, well, go where people aren't going. And, to David's point, I've said this for the last year and a half, 2 years. I think especially Hall of Famers, rookie cards, autograph rookie cards, are super undervalued, like crazy undervalued, criminally undervalued. And I think that is a market that has a ton of potential to grow. Most of these guys are dead, so they're not going to be more quantity going out in the market. So you got to look where others aren't looking. And the guys that I know that have been the most successful in this space from an investment perspective have done exactly that. So don't follow the shiny bright lights.
Okay, Nick, final word. What do you got?
To build off Jesse's point, always evolve in what you're collecting. I mean, I like to zag while everybody's, following the trend. I mean, you could, still buy consistent, you could still find very consistent buys. I mean, right now I'm buying game worn memorabilia, specifically NBA jerseys. And I just feel like based off the cards, I can't buy anything Steph Curry for, 25 grand that I feel like is very impactful within the market. But from a game worn jersey front, I could potentially get a game worn jersey in about that range or maybe a little bit more. So I think bang for your buck is everything. And I think, the long-term potential of game worn memorabilia is drastically, I think has more potential upside than cards.
Wow, 3-man weave there. You guys were all together on that one. What a run out of the timeout. Good job, guys. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the panel. For David Kohler, Jesse Craig, and Nick Sapero, I'm Bram Weinstein. We'll see you next time.